Hi, I'm Dan Wilson. I'm the Last C consultant at ISIS Technology, and I'm here with our strategic account manager, Ian Cooperman. And today we're going to talk about how to prepare for your Jira migration. So what's the problem that we're trying to address? Many companies today are finding that they need to migrate from server or data center to the cloud. And they might be in that process merging Jira instances. And this can be very challenging work. Ian?
Yeah, preparing the data really behind that migration is where that challenge comes from, right? So the biggest problem when we have a messy instance is trying to prepare data that is on server data center and try to move it to cloud. When you have to both clean up and do migration, it becomes very tedious, challenging, and very time consuming. And so typically companies don't have time to manage their Jira instances, keeping them clean and also do their day job, right? We're all wearing many hats and very challenging sometimes to be able to kind of manage these platforms that we are admins of. So what we would want to focus on is how do we clean up the instance to be able to support a very clean, smooth migration to cloud.
So some of the ways we do this is to clean up and consolidate the efforts behind the scenes. We're going to evaluate the cloud, the server and the data center instance you might be working with, and remove any unused components. We want to review your fields and see what types they are and if they can make the migration, or if there's going to be special needs to get the data moved into the cloud instance. We're going to take a look and evaluate all the workflows. What scripts are being run and are they optimized for this migration? Many times we find that apps have been added to the instance, complicating a simple process of clearing a field or copying a field, which can be done natively in Jira. And by making that change before the migration, it allows for a cleaner, less messy experience. User management is also key. The rules for users in the cloud is very different from that on server or data center. Each user has to have an email address, and there can only be one account for each email address. And so we would be looking for those types of problems. Ian, I know you've worked with a lot of apps and migrations. What are some of the ones you've had to deal with, or how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I think if anyone is, currently in the process of thinking through whether or not to do a migration, the apps is the most crucial part of it. It's the most complex part, right? Atlassian has built out server data center for years upon years, then moved to cloud. Not a lot of those apps have also, those vendors of those apps have moved over to cloud, or they have, but there is some differentiation between what's on cloud and what's on server data center. And so one of the bigger challenges is, are you using apps that are being actually used, the apps that you're paying for? Do you have apps that, multiple apps that are kind of doing the same thing? So a lot of things that we want to do is focus on, the cleanup of those apps, make sure we're not using apps that were added a decade ago, but are no longer being used and you're still paying for them. So big thing to focus on as especially part of migration is how to handle the cleanup of those apps and what needs to actually go over to cloud.
So can you tell us a little bit more about how ISIS can help with this process?
So yeah, so typically when organizations are moving to cloud from data center or server, they spend a whole lot of time on analysis and making sure everything gets moved over and really trying to pick apart their instance and make sure everything looks smoothly. That's something that we actually do, right? So we'll come in and we will, based on your instance, based on how you've structured your instance, we will provide you a recommendation on how we can move things over, what things can't come over, and how can we customize those to be able to come over if need be. We have a lot of experience on how to use, the scripts that we built out to make things move faster and to simplify and reduce the time that it takes for you to get to cloud. Another thing that we really focus on is, what does it look like for your users whenever you transition over to cloud? So there's definitely a different experience between server and data center, and so server, data center, and cloud. And so we want to make sure that users understand what that transition looks like, and we also want to make sure that whenever we do move you over, that you have a clean environment already ready for you to then continue to keep clean. Yeah, so another thing, ISOS partners closely with you to achieve a successful migration. So we're in it with you. We want to make sure that based on how things are structured inside of your server data center, that we move that same structure over to cloud, and that you and your users are able to use cloud on day one after the migration.
Thanks for joining us as we talked about how to prepare for your Jira migration. For more information, check out our webinar, 5 Rules for Cleaning and Organizing Your Atlassian House, at the link below.